morning's policy session. So this is the second morning of the Efficient Buildings Digital Days. So my name's Vicky Lucas. I work for the Institute for Environmental Analytics at the University of Reading, and it's my pleasure to be moderating this morning's session. So this whole event is to further the discussions on sustainable transition and refurbishing public buildings. The Efficient Buildings Digital Days consists of 3 mornings of policy sessions. That was yesterday, today and tomorrow from 10 a.m. to midday. And there are also 6 practical capacity building workshops each afternoon, Monday to Wednesday this week, and another 3 next week. So on housekeeping, so we have interpreters, so you can listen in either English or French, and the options for translation is one of the icons at the bottom of your Zoom screen. So please be aware this session is being recorded, and those recordings will be available on the Efficient Buildings community website afterwards. So during this session, you're welcome to put questions into the Q&A blocks. Please do. We'll monitor that, and I can include those for the panelists in the discussion sessions later this morning. So back to today's agenda. So we have the inaugural speech to set the context on the importance of financing, and then we'll have 2 panel discussions. One on the public view of the recovery funds applied to the resilience plans, and the second panel is on the role of financial sector in the energy transition in public buildings. But first, we'll have a welcome by the Efficient Buildings community by Giulia Galluccio, who is Director of Information Systems for the Climate Science and Decision Making Division of CMCC, which conducts research on climate science and policy. Giulia, good morning.
Good morning, Vicky. Thank you, Vicky, and good morning, everyone. I just share my slides, my few slides. Okay, so here we are. Okay, so just few words on our community and on the today's agenda. Okay, so the Efficient Buildings community. So the Efficient Buildings community is a network of public authorities, energy agencies, and research institutions from the Mediterranean area. The aim of our community is to share innovative solutions for energy efficiency in public buildings with a specific focus into the Mediterranean area. And our aim is to build synergies for the renovation of the public building stock. So their community aims to advocate for Mediterranean-specific recommendations in the framework of EU and national policy making. The community is also supported by the Efficient Buildings Project Partnership, which is funded within the Interreg-Med program. You can see in the screen on the bottom of my slide all the partners forming this partnership, this very fruitful partnership, and also the long-standing partnership. We are already at our 6th year of our activities. So within the communities, we have 10 modular projects. All the projects have been funded by the same program, by the Interreg-Med program. Namely, those projects are CESBA-Med, Edu Footprint, Energy, Impulse, New Finance, Priority, Sherpa, SISMA, Stepping, and T-Schools. The modular projects have developed a rich toolkit of digital solutions to facilitate the public authorities in the refurbishment of their building stock throughout the whole life cycle. And of course, you can find a little more on our website on the single projects and on the all the tools that have been developed by those projects. So the Efficient Buildings Digital Days. As part of our activities, the community this year is now organizing the Digital Days from the 7th of June to the 17th of June. So our aim is to move forward the discussion on the post-COVID-19 recovery, and on the role of public buildings refurbishment in the transition towards sustainability. Yesterday, we had the opportunity to discuss with the representatives of the Portuguese government, which is the current presidency of the European Council, and with French members of the parliaments and Italian and Spanish local authorities. Tomorrow, we will see what can Mediterranean public authorities do in transferring the sustainable practices to the southern shore of the Mediterranean Sea. So I'm quite proud to say also that the Efficient Buildings community have launched this partnership initiative between the two shores of the Mediterranean Sea. So we will discuss this in deep tomorrow with the tomorrow morning session. Then during this afternoon, as Vicky has already said, and also next week, we have the opportunity to see more and to look with your own eyes on the digital solution developed by the modular projects of the Efficient Buildings community. In particular, this afternoon, you will hear about the stepping tools for energy performance contracting. So coming to today, this is the agenda of this morning, 2 dense hours. Why we decided to dedicate one of our policy morning session to finance. We are on the eve of an unprecedented availability of financial resources for the sustainable recovery. So we need to recover, we need to trigger massive transformation of our cities in order to meet the objectives of the Green Deal and of its renovation wave. We need, first of all, to transform those recovery plans into real actions. So today we will try to shed a light on some fundamental questions. So what are member states preparing? What are regions preparing for their next programming period? And are the financial institutions ready to sustain this transition? So we will discuss all this with our guests today. First of all, we will have the inaugural speech of Mariangela Fabbri from the Buildings Performance Institute Europe. She will talk about the role of financial aspects for the success of buildings renovation. And then we will have 2 panel discussions. The first panel, the public view on the recovery funds applied to the resilience plans. We will have with Sébastien Leclef, Noémie Bichon from Energy Cities, and Julien Tijol from Housing Europe, and Sébastien Leclef, from the Council of European Municipalities and Regions. And then we will have a second panel on the role of financial sector in the energy transition in the public buildings. And so we will look into the private side, and we will hear from Monica Biglio from Ca' Foscari University, Antonio Lopez Martinez from G&E Finance, and Mr. Denis Rodriguez from the European Investment Bank. So I don't want to take too much time, so I would like to thank you everybody for being here today, for attending this session. And of course, I wish us a fruitful and interesting discussion. And I leave the floor to Vicky. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Julia. Thanks for the overview. That's great. Thanks for the introduction to today's session as well. So as Julia said, we're talking about finance. We have some fantastic contributors who are going to speak for the rest of the morning. But now I'd like to introduce our inaugural speaker, Mariangela Fabbri, who is Head of Research for the Buildings Performance Institute Europe. Mariangela has extensive experience of working in the energy efficiency and climate change policy analysis and has managed flagship projects, including de-risking energy efficiency investments and the adoption of clean energy packages for all Europeans. So she's worked as an energy consultant in Montreal and also for the Worldwide Fund for Nature in Brussels. So welcome, Mariangela.
Thank you, Vicky, and thank you for inviting me to open your session this morning. I'm going to share my slides, so there's no issue with that.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, thank you very much. So the topic is really on point. It's a hot topic in Brussels and all over Europe. So I think this is the right moment to discuss about these issues. For those who do not know who BPI is, we are a small think tank. We are based in Brussels and we have an office in Berlin. We are 11 years old, so we're relatively young. And we do research and analysis on building performance to provide policy advice on building regulation from design to implementation, both to member states, to European institutions, but we work closely with partners and research institutions across Europe because we base all our analyses and recommendations on research that is funded by Horizon Europe and formerly Horizon 2020 and other type of projects. So we only focus on buildings. That's the core of our activities. So I think to set up the conversation today, and I'm pretty sure that the following speakers will go much into details about what I will present now. I think it's important to put things in context and understanding where we're coming from when discussing about buildings renovation and when discussing about the recovery and resilience plans. And the good way that I think a good place to start are the European targets and the role of buildings in the European context. We know the buildings consume 40% of total final energy consumption, and it's about 36% of the CO2 emissions across Europe. And the European Commission, supported by the Parliament and the councils in the last few years, have actually made very, very clear that buildings, it's an unavoidable sector that we need to tackle when it comes to dealing with climate change. The latest target, 55% greenhouse gas emissions reduction by 2030, is an expression of these ambitions. And however, we've also seen that this target has evolved over time. So some of the main objectives that the European Commission gave to itself, including the objective in the renovation wave that was published last October of doubling the annual renovation rate across Europe, we know that are not up to task. According to our own analysis and to our own studies, we know that we need an average rate of deep renovation of at least 3% per year until 2030 if we want to achieve this target. And in the past year, even before the new target was announced, BPI did some analysis about what would be the investment needs to meet these targets, and we have estimated that we would need, on average, across Europe, about 90 billion euros to trigger renovation at a scale that is suitable to the ambition and to the challenge at hand. And these investment would cover not only deep renovation programs, but also advisory services, technical assistance, but also investment in serial renovation solutions. One of the clear elements and key elements that we have been seeing in most of the analysis that we have done. It's not only about how to overcome the more traditional barriers of renovation that are linked at the complexity of the processes and the difficult to get the right financing. But it's also about making sure that these renovations start happening at a scale that actually manages to renovate thousands and thousands of buildings in every country on a steady base. And investing in these 90 billions would actually support and trigger potential annual investment of much higher scale. We're talking about 240 billion per year, divided between residential and non-residential renovation. And you can see here how the assessment about how these 90 billions would be split between deep renovation programs, advisory services, and technical assistance, and really kickstarting renovation at an industrial scale. Finding the best approach for renovation projects from a financing perspective, I'm pretty sure you all know it's not an easy feature, because the issue very often is not only about how much money we have available to invest and how much more that investment can trigger, but it's how can we provide the right type of financing for the right type of building and of renovation projects. And I'm borrowing here a summary table that Paolo Bertoldi from GRC and some of his colleagues published recently about the different approaches for financing energy renovation. They focus here on residential buildings, but something similar can be established also for public buildings. And as you can see, there are really different type of financings, and some of them are much more matured and well established than others. The challenge today is not only to make sure that these established and well proven and functioning models are actually easily replicated across cities, across countries, and across Europe, but also that those new models that have been tested and are growing, and the more innovative one, are also explored at a level that would allow to go beyond the pilot project, and really thinking about how these different typologies can be really made suitable for different type of renovations. You know very well that we have at our hands, every government in Europe is discussing and negotiating their recovery and resilience funds, and this is a great opportunity to actually use some of the money that the European Union is putting on the table to actually cover and do exactly what I said, invest on those programs that we know are working, but also exploring those who show biggest potential, so that we can really understand what are the changes in the market that are needed to make sure that these renovation programs are met with the right financing tools. There isn't much that we know yet about the recovery and resilience funds, and I'm showing here a very useful tool that has been developed by the Wuppertal Institute and E3G, where they're keeping track of how the different member states are allocating funds to the different flagship. And you can see even in the Mediterranean area, the situation is not it's not that bad. I think the light green around Spain and the darker green around Italy and France and Portugal show green investment to a lower threshold than the 37% to be allocated to climate change, but they are not that far from that. And on average, on the different countries that have been analyzed, the spending dedicated and allocated to buildings, it's around 8%. And it's really important to really understand how these funds can be used and where they can be allocated. So really, to go back to what I was saying before, improving the assistance to remove the administrative and knowledge barriers for municipalities and small and medium enterprises, can be funded by the recovery plan. One-stop shop, technical assistance, advisory services. These funds can be used to support financial institutions by de-risking the energy efficiency investment, so providing credit guarantees for those financial institutions that are providing loans for renovations. And they can also, of course, be used to fund pure and traditional renovation programs. The Recovery and Resilience Facility has allocated over 670 billion euros and split almost equally between grants and loans. And this really reflects a little bit what I was showing before about the need to make sure that we provide different type of funding so that these combinations can be allowed. However, we need to make sure to understand that funding alone and having the right amount of money on the table is just one of the enabling conditions to actually achieve the renovation wave. And there are really what we're talking about, and the scale and the depth of the renovation that we have to face is so big that we're really talking about creating the conditions for a renovation revolution rather than a normal and more traditional scale up, if I can call it this way. So it is really, really important to make sure that together with having and securing the right amount of funds that can trigger this initial investment, there are a number of other elements that are always and constantly being taken into account. The first one is making sure that these availability of financing is matched by a political plan and a political will and proper implementation. And in this, from this perspective, the recovery and resilience plans, together with the long-term renovation strategies that every member state is required to deliver, provide a funding, both the finding opportunities and the policy planning tool, and they have to really be used hand in hand and make sure that they are connected. The long-term renovation strategies can be used as roadmap, and the recovery plans can be used to really financing the national priorities that have been identified and overcoming the early financial hurdles of programs and renovation. And this is particularly true for public authorities that might need additional support when it comes to technical assistance, or when it comes to creating the internal processes that would allow scaling up the renovations that they are managing. It's important to direct the funds where they're mostly needed, starting from the worst performing buildings. And it's important to plan for long-term investment. This is an essential point. The renovation programs take some time to actually kickstart being properly implemented. The other three elements are absolutely making sure that the citizens are supported in their renovation decision. And in order to do that, programs like one-stop shops, integrated renovation services can be funded by using the recovery plans. And the last 2 points are really linked to the need to innovate in the construction and renovation market. So really making sure that there are services offered to small and medium enterprises that really compose and constitute the backbones of the construction sector in Europe, to embolden exploring and finding new and comprehensive renovation solutions, but also to finance the innovation in a renovation. You have pictures here of manufacturing that is actually investing in prefabricated renovation components, and that would project like this, an investment in project and programs like this, can actually help scaling up and creating that sort of massification and standardization of renovation that is today absolutely missing. So just to conclude, how can we make the renovation revolution happen? That's how I call it. Really making sure that the unrepeatable opportunity to create the shift in construction sector is taken and the right investment are made, and that there is really this long-term approach. The plans need to be prepared quickly, but this is a marathon. We are talking about investment for the next 10 years. And if we do it right, then we can think through how to go through the following 10 years. We need to be ambitious in design, in implementation, and in financing. The three go together. You being ambitious in financing with the other two elements will not deliver. And making sure that the workforce follows that money. If we have the greatest renovation programs, but then we're not able to find the right enterprises, companies, skilled workforce, and materials to deliver this renovation, we will not be able to achieve this. And this is an absolutely essential track how the recovery funds is spent, assess and evaluate the programs, readjust according to the evaluations, and making sure that what you did wrong in the first couple of years, mistakes are bound to happen, will be corrected, and the ambition will be maintained. And the last point that I want to make is making sure that no one is left behind. The transition has to be fair and equal, and I think the following speakers will probably touch upon this in from different perspectives. But there is now room and there is now funding available to make sure that we can tailor some of these programs, and they can tailor our approach to renovation also to include those who might not be ready to invest, those who might not be able to afford it, and those that live in energy poverty. And with this, I conclude my presentation. All of our work is available on our website. So if you have any request or curiosity or follow-up question, I'll be happy to reply and to direct you to our studies. Thank you very much.
That's great. Thank you very much. That's fantastic. And yeah, some fantastic comments there. But obviously, as you say, it's not just a question of the financing, it's not just the money, but it's the right mechanism for the right need at the right time with the right people. So just quickly, if you can, so what's a good current example of something that's actually working? So where, building renovations is actually happening. So is it a particular country or a particular class of building or a particular financial instrument that's actually making some progress right now?
I think there are different programs that work in separate context. The most interesting one we find are the programs that are trying to innovate. The serial renovation by programs that are really trying to renovate a large number of housing in a similar way. It's a very interesting model. I mean, everyone is aware of the Energiesprong program in the Netherlands that is now being tested across several countries. However, we know that this program cannot be just copy and pasted into different countries because it works under specific conditions. And while it has clearly figured out how to do it from a technical perspective, from the financial perspective, is still not as cost efficient as they are trying to make. They're really investing and trying to understand how they can lower the cost of that type of renovation. But that is just one example. Then you have the traditional programs like the KfW loans in Germany that are really specific loans that are tailored for residential renovations. They have been ongoing for over 20 years. And they have really attaching the level of loans and better rates according to the level of efficiency that will be achieved. But at the same time, they've worked really well for a long time, but they now don't seem to trigger the scale that is needed, the remaining blocks of renovations that is necessary. So for every, there are a lot of really good programs. I'm following closely because I'm really curious to understand how it will pan out the super bonus in Italy, so the tradable tax credit scheme, to try to understand what happens when you remove the financial component, the financial hurdle to that. How would the market be able to follow? How would the public authorities be able to adjust to a steep increase in demand for renovation? But also, will all the renovations be at the level in terms of energy performance and energy efficiency that are needed to make sure that once that building is renovated, we are pretty sure that we will not be able to renovate it again in another 20 or 30 years. Because if we do it wrong and we lock in some technologies, the advantages might be lost in a short amount of time. So unfortunately, there's not one excellent example that works everywhere. As I said, the one-fits-all approach is not really, unfortunately, suitable, but there are plenty of really excellent ideas. And on financing, I know there are projects, in some we are even part of it, like on-bill financing. It's a new concept for Europe. The PACE, it's a property assessment for clean energy program where you attach the renovation cost of the loan to the value of the property, not to the owners. Energy efficiency mortgages, and I think Monica Bilio will present about this later. So
she will, yes.
There's a lot going on, and
I
think there's increased potential to actually get it right, but we need to, all our heads and brains needs to go toward the same.
So thank you. Continual innovation.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for that. Okay, so so now we have the first discussion panel. Each of our speakers will speak for about 3 minutes, and then we'll move to questions and discussions. So please do put questions in the question and answer box. That would be great if you'd like to have anything answered by our speakers. So this next panel is on the public view of the recovery funds as applied to the resilience plans. And our first speaker is Sébastien Leclerc, who is a project officer at CEMR, the Council of European Municipalities and Regions. So he has extensive experience in social and economic policy and advocacy. He currently works on climate planning and energy with sub-Saharan African cities and coordinates the initiative Covenant of Mayors for Sub-Saharan Africa. And today he'll be speaking on how are the European regions planning the building sector pathways. Sébastien, give us your position.
Thank you very much, Vicky, and good morning, everybody. Let me share my screen. Hopefully this works. Right. All right. So thank you for the invitation, and let me start by saying a few things about CMR. We are rather an old organization, the Council of European Municipalities and Regions, because we celebrated actually this year our anniversary of 70 years old. So we bring together national associations of local and regional governments from about 41 European countries, so not just EU, and we represent them at all level of territory, so local, intermediate, and regional. One of our key priority is that the voice and concerns of local and regional governments are heard and reflected in EU policies. I'm speaking from Brussels, and so we developed the concept of governance in partnership. So for a multi-level governance approach that really considers local and regional stakeholders as partners for the design, for the implementation, the monitoring of the policies that affect them. And so we advocate for this principle to be applied throughout all national and EU policy process that will have an impact on them. so we regularly monitor the effective implementation of this principle, and that is why today I will focus this presentation on the study that we did together with the Committee of Regions on the involvement of municipalities, cities and regions in the programming of national recovery and resilience plans. Yeah, what we call the RRF, the Recovery and Resilience Facility. This is the main tool of the EU recovery package. So it will support reforms and investments to mitigate the impact of the pandemic, and channel investments on climate and digital transition. What is clear for us is that obviously the social and economic impact of COVID will have a very high importance on the local and regional level. So therefore, the recovery measures should at the very least be designed in partnership with the local governments to understand the challenges that are facing the territories. The Commission President von der Leyen did recognize actually this role of the local governments in the recovery, and particularly to drive forward the Green Deal with the renovation wave in particular, and yet the Commission only advised member states to involve local governments in the preparation of plans. So there is no express obligation to do so. So to check the involvement of local governments, we partner with the Committee of Region for this survey with all national associations. And actually, after my presentation, I will share the link for those interested to read more about it, to ask them how they have been informed and involved in the process. So we received from our members 25 answers from about 19-20 countries. And what you will see by the end of this presentation is that the signs are not really encouraging. With some few exceptions, local governments, local representatives were not or as involved as we would have liked to. So the survey began by asking questions linked to the experience of respondents of being involved in the European semester process. This is important because the assessment and monitoring of the recovery of the resilience plans will be closely aligned with the European semester. So only 2 of 25 respondents reported that their organization had been consulted with an impact on the outcome, while 9 organizations were consulted but said that they had no or limited impact. Then you had some respondents that I think that was from Germany, France, and the Netherlands, that they had been consulted, but they had very little impact because of short deadlines and limited times to making substantial contribution. So for the majority of the respondents, the situation is even less favorable. So 14 respondents in total had neither no role at all in the process or were merely informed about the final outcome, so without even being consulted. So here is actually maybe an important slide. So turning to the process of preparing the RRPs, so the plans, the situation is even less encouraging. Only a minority of member states have been consulted, have consulted the local governments and the national association. Several respondents, so from Belgium, from Slovenia, Sweden, they took the initiative to try and provide input to the process, but they were unsuccessful or only on sectoral parts, but not the overall process. So we noted also some positive examples where local governments in Finland, Ireland, Lithuania were consulted with an impact on the outcome. When I say an impact, it's regarding the definition of the overall priorities and objectives in the RRPs. So in several other member states, the respondents said it was too early to assess the overall level and success of the involvement. So on the type of involvement, from informal consultation to institutionalized working groups, we found out that at the political level, the involvement was mostly ad hoc. So while at the technical level, it's usually more institutionalized. And the type of country, so whether it is a unitary or a federal system, and the level of decentralization does not seem to play any role in the type of consultation mechanism in that regards. So 3 respondents from Finland, from Spain, and Lithuania, they stated that they were involved in a structured manner, and both at political and the technical level. The Finnish example, so of structural involvement is worth mentioning, because they were explaining that the Ministry of Finance in Finland, which is responsible for the preparation, had organized information session for all the regions in Finland and key parties at the regional level, and as well for municipalities, cities invited to these sessions. Okay, on the main barriers to successful involvement, the most common answer is the lack of willingness on behalf of the national government, which did not seek to involve the subnational government representatives. Another one was the format of the exchange, so not enabling effective involvement. On the fact that the process was led by a ministry with which the organization has a usually limited contact with, or sometimes that several ministries were organizing their own consultation, so that made it difficult for the local governments to know who to turn to. And the problem of insufficient time to participate was raised by 5 organizations. So in France, for instance, it was only 2 weeks that were granted by the government, which is very, very short. Other barriers that were raised too, an example was the recent elections, so both at national or local level, that caused some difficulties for involving local governments. And then again, there are few, but still 2 member states, respondents from 2 member states, so in Ireland and Lithuania, they noted that no significant barriers existed, and they praised the good cooperation from the national government. Finally, we wanted to know more on the content of these national recovery and resilience plans, and we asked the association whether they had already received a draft. And by early 2021, so January, only 6 of them received such documents. And among them, only 1 said that the plan responded to the challenges that the local governments are facing to a large extent. And 4 of them say that it did to a limited extent, and 1 of them said not at all. So 2 respondents say that the plan contributed to a large extent to enhancing the cohesion, the territorial cohesion, and reducing regional disparities. And the same number that said that the plan effectively coordinated recovery funding with the other source, so EU funds, for example. And then respondents were rather positive on the plan's effective support for the green digital transition, So with 4 respondents saying that it provides support to a larger extent. And yeah, a final note. So for us, CMR, we regret that the partnership principle was not really included in the RRF regulation. And as we can witness that without legal obligation, appropriate consultation does not happen. So failing to comply to this principle of partnership in the programming, this presents actually a risk of inconsistencies between the RRF and the cohesion policy funds, and the fact that they are planned by different ministries and that they will be managed separately is itself a risk of inefficiency of the EU funds. So for the same reason, the partnership principle should apply to the recovery and resilience facility. It should also be the norm in various other areas. So for us, we of course strongly support the bottom-up process within the framework of the national energy and climate plans. And for these reasons, we call for a member state for having to negotiate with the local governments.
Yeah, if you could just sum up and then.
Yeah. So, well, generally, the conclusion is we will continue to work on this issue in the months to come, and we're happy to report back later. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for that. So just a very quick answer to this then. So you mentioned the lack of consultation and that legislation might be a way to, by national government, and legislation might be one way to address that. But are there any other ways, other than forcing people, other ways to make national governments more consultative with the other parts of?
It's of course let's say political willingness of doing so. Yes, and understanding the value that can have such a dialogue with the local governments.
That's great. Thank you very much for that, Sebastian. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so our second speaker is Naomi Bichon, who works on EU projects for energy cities and she's got a background in international relations and development and has worked for a number of organizations on communications and sharing best practice. So Naomi will speak for about 3 minutes. We just have a quick talk before we have a discussion on what should be the role of the municipalities for the recovery funds and the renovation wave.
Yes, yes, thank you very much, Vicky. Okay, can you all see my screen?
Good, and just full screen.
Yes.
That's lovely.
Perfect. So thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. My statement will be on the role of municipalities in the recovery and the renovation wave. I have also been analyzing recovery plans to see the extent to which they can support a local green recovery. So far, I have looked into 4 Mediterranean states, so Spain, Portugal, Italy, and France. And what I can say on the renovation wave is that renovation of municipal buildings is a priority. And to some extent, other aspects of the renovation wave are also taken into account, such as tackling energy poverty. However, except perhaps in Spain, there is no acknowledgement of a more global vision of the role that municipalities can play as drivers of the renovation wave. Rather, they are seen as implementers. And this is my first point. Cities should play the role of orchestra conductors rather than musicians. They have an important role in facilitating, making demand and supply meet, supporting house owners and SMEs in their renovations via one-stop shops or online platforms. And they're also important drivers of the renovation wave. Of course, renovating public municipal buildings and infrastructures, but that's not enough to be in line with the climate neutrality targets. They should also plan district heating and cooling fed by renewable energy, while fighting energy poverty, or also rehabilitating former industrial wastelands to turn them in neutral living neighborhoods, for example. And all that I've just mentioned is to some extent, depending on the member states covered in the plans. However, and this is my second point, often the focus is on short-term stimulus spending, rather than conceiving and implementing innovative and ambitious projects with a more global approach to the renovation wave. Indeed, in our opinion, recovery plans should not just recover the economy from the crisis, meaning going back to what we used to do, but we see it as a unique opportunity to massively invest in the economy of the future to reach the climate neutrality goal of the European Union. However, member states and also the Commission are looking for quick and high investment return. So many calls for projects are already open, they have short deadlines, and they will prioritize projects that have the capacity of being rapidly implemented and with high investment return, indeed, such as replacing lighting in municipal buildings with LED. But there are two problems with this short-term stimulus approach. The first is that the calendars are too short, and there is a risk that cities don't have the capacity to respond to the call for projects, especially the smaller and medium-sized cities that don't have the human resources, which might create a gap, territorial gap. And the second is that it doesn't allow more innovative and ambitious projects to emerge when cities need to urgently start planning how to phase out of fossil fuels and heating and cooling, for example. So beyond simply making funds available, what we would have liked to see in the plans is technical and financial assistance, once again, especially for small and medium cities, to plan ambitious and innovative projects, but that are also economically viable and interesting for investors. And technical assistance can also help cities make their projects fit the available funding streams on the recovery, but also on their regional development funds, for instance. And that's really something that is missing from the plans. Secondly, cities need time to think. Implementation of the recovery plans will start at the beginning of the EU semesters, so September, October 2021. And once again, member states prefer call for projects to disperse the funds rapidly, and projects are being selected right now during the summer, and some call for projects are already closed. And this does not allow cities to have time to think out of the box, get inspired through peer-to-peer exchanges and consulting national experts for an innovation-driven energy transition beyond the renovation wave. So to conclude, we'd like to conclude on the next steps. Inform yourself on what are the available funds under the recovery in your member state by contacting your national contact point, finance ministries, or looking on your national recovery website. And secondly, I totally agree with Mariangela Fabbri. Be ready to sprint, be proactive, gather relevant stakeholders together, and already start drafting projects, and afterwards you can make them match with the coming call for projects. Don't wait for the call for projects to come out, because it will be too late. It will be really a sprint race. And I have two good examples to share afterwards if you would like to feed later the discussion.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, we'll come back to those. Thank you very much. No, it's a really good point. And as you say, this idea that innovation is required, but that needs time and capacity, and that's what there isn't. So yeah, it's great. Thank you very much for that. It was a good reflection on our inaugural talk as well. Okay, so our third panelist and speaker is Julien Dijol, who is Policy Coordinator at Housing Europe. He works to ensure that the advocacy of Housing Europe is effective and grounded in the experience of its members. So he's worked extensively on EU projects on energy and social development, including authoring a report on the financing of renovation in the social housing sector. So Julien is going to share his position on which are the public policies and market-based solutions to increase the scale of energy efficiency investments across Europe. Julien.
Yeah, good morning, Vicky. Good morning to all. Thank you very much. And indeed, I will be only able to answer or to kickstart the discussion actually, because of the very limited time that we have. So I'm sharing the screen. Yep, full screen. Okay, so
That's great, thanks.
Yeah, that was the question about the kind of policy that we want to promote with the recovery plans, but in general with public funding. To answer that question, I'd like to talk briefly about what we believe is a success story regarding the approach to a fair energy transition in the social housing sector. A note of caution at the beginning: obviously, social housing represents only 10 to 12% of the total housing stock in Europe. You have basically 70% of homeowners which are actually isolated in their poorly insulated homes, and you have indeed a bit of private rental housing. So we all agree that the biggest challenge lies in the homeowners sector, but maybe some of the success factors that we can have in the social housing sector could be transferred into the homeowners sector. All in all, this is about housing policy and how we want to decarbonize the sector. So about social housing providers, clearly, if you look at the figure, simply the average energy performance of the dwellings, or if you want to look at the emitted CO2 per square meter, clearly the social housing providers are leading the fair energy transition. I mean, they are better in terms of the energy performance and CO2 emission. The main mission, however, and that's been the case for 100 years, is to provide affordable and quality homes for those in need. The thing is that, of course, this definition of what is quality homes and decent homes has evolved, and today it clearly includes the challenge of sustainability and climate change. But this is not the only part of the story. The other part is COVID, and COVID-19 has clearly exacerbated the demand for social housing and welfare state. So we now are in a situation where the mission of social housing providers has expanded, and now it includes not only the necessity to provide healthy and quality homes at a greater number, but also to have a meaningful contribution to the climate change mitigation. The good news is that in the sector, for now about 10 years, we have seen a culture change. Really, I mean, what we can say about the low carbon culture, we can call it the low carbon culture in both new construction and renovation. And this has been integrated into the wider discussion about what social housing means nowadays. This low carbon culture has translated in many areas, all related to decarbonization. So basically working on the building envelope, but also working on the carbon content of the energy mix, for instance. Obviously, this is what has happened over the last 10 years, last decade, but this is not the end of the story. I mean, we need to be ambitious for the next 10 years. And this is one of the things that we are promoting at the moment. We call it the 4 million homes ambition. It's to say that we need and we want to renovate or to have our fair share of the renovation wave by renovating 4 million homes by 2030. And obviously this is based on the skills that we have in the sector, which is quite unique, combined with another unique feature, which is a strong relationship with tenants, a strong relationship with the residents, and a care for what inspired them in the daily life. And this combination of technical skills on the one hand and care for what people are inspired to is very essential. And when you have the two elements, you need a third element, which is obviously finance and funding. I have some nice examples of what the sector is doing, but I don't have time really to dwell too much on that. But essentially, the good thing is that in our sector, when we do renovation and decarbonization, we improve quality of life. We turn neighborhoods into a great place to live in. And we also the sector where innovation takes place. Innovation that will, at the end of the day, reach the goal of decarbonization. So I want to stop here just for you to think about, those are some elements that make decarbonization a success in the social housing sector. How can we pick up some of them and transfer it into the wider discussion on the other segment of the housing market? So yeah, I'll stop here, Vicky, and happy to continue conversation. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that. So if anybody wants to pose some questions, please do in the question and answer box. But we'll go back to Naomi for the moment. So tell us about how the recovery funds can help implement the actions implemented in the new CCAP. So that's the Sustainable Energy Access and Climate Action Plans.
Yes, I will start by saying that I cannot reply exactly because it depends from a member state to another, really, the extent to which they will finance the actions, not just on Renovation Wave. They can also cover more broadly on adaptation and mitigation actions. However, I would really like to flag something. It's that the money is not so much the problem. The problem is that there is a huge gap between the very high ambition of the cities that are signing the Covenant of Mayors and that are committing to go beyond EU and national targets that are already pretty ambitious, and the financing of the actions. Once again, there is a need of technical assistance so that the actions listed in the CCAPs are feasible and interesting for investors. And I would just like to flag to the cities listening to us that need technical assistance, Horizon 2020 project, which supports cities in developing a mature and credible investment concept. So it's a document that details all the information needed to finance a project, such as stakeholders, legal, economic, and financial studies, etc. And there will be 2 calls. There are 2 calls already, and there will be 2 coming calls, one in October and November 2021, and the second in May, June 2022. So it's called the EU CT facility if you're interested. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. That'll be very useful. That's good news. And then finally, so Julian, I mean, so you talked about obviously the importance of money, but are there any legal barriers that need to be addressed in order to make, you know, the progress to renovation happen quicker and in a, you know, a more coherent way?
Well, talking about the socializing sector, which, as I said, is only 10 to 11% of the housing stock. I mean, what we need absolutely is a regulatory stability. And it's not only a question of, I mean, it's a question of being able actually to deliver and to know the regulatory framework, but it's also being able to attract potential private finance, which seem to be increasingly interested in investing in social housing as well. And for that, they need a stability in the legislation and in the legal aspect. On top of that, what is very important is to focus on the ability also to bundle different projects, including in the social housing sector itself, which by a sense is already regulated and anyway collectively organized, but still we still need in the social housing sector this way of bringing together different projects and having financial intermediaries that can be able to deal with, like the EIB or other aspects. So it's not strictly speaking legal barriers, but those are regulatory aspects which are needed, which are essential factors.
Thank you, and that's a really good point. I think that's a good point in general for all of these planning things, is that certainty is what all of these things are about. For anybody to put in enough time or enough money, it's about, you know, knowing that this is still going to apply in 5 years' time or 10 years' time. Yeah, thank you very much for that. So we've run out of time on that, so we've finished with our first panel. But thank you very much to our speakers. So we'll just have a quick break. We'll have about a minute's break just to have a quick stretch, and then we'll move on to the second session. So just take a deep breath, stretch your legs, shake your head, look out the window, and we will be back in about 30 seconds.
Thank you, Vicky.
Okay, so we'll move on to the next discussion. So, and Julien segued very nicely into it. So, I'm talking about the role of the EIB, and we'll be talking to Dinis Rodriguez as part of this panel. So our next discussion is on implementing the transition and the need for private funds. So this next panel has 3 speakers who you can see on the screen there. So we have Monica, Antonio and Dinis, and it will be on the theme of the role of the financial sector in the energy transition in public buildings and the need for private funds in implementing that transition. So each of our panel will speak for about 3 minutes to tell us their view of the world, and then we will move on to questions and discussion. So again, do put questions into the question and answer box, and we'll see if our panelists can answer those later. So our first speaker is Monica Buglio. She's Professor of Econometrics at the University Ca' Foscari of Venice, and she works on many research projects financed by the European Commission, Eurostat, the European Investment Bank, the World Bank, and the Italian Ministry of Research. And Monica is now the coordinator of a new project, mainstreaming transparent assessment of energy efficiency in environmental social governance ratings. Monica, welcome.
Thank you for the invitation, for the opportunity to be with you. Let me share then my screen and quickly present I mean, the mainstream in some way of my project, I mean, related to this energy efficiency mortgages initiative. Then I'm talking more on regarding the banking sector than the possibility that the banking sector can be helpful in this direction. Here is just a picture that you know quite well, but looking at the EU building stock, I mean, the most part of it, this means private and public buildings, I mean, have been constructed before 2001, then before 2000. And this means that they account anyhow for the 40% of the EU energy use, the 36% of gas emission. Then to be able to work on this stock, it is really important. This means 200 billion of yearly investment to reach EU targets, and then a significant part of these must come from the private sector, since the public funding paying large at the moment is not anyhow enough to obtain the result. Then this is what we have done and what we are doing. There are at the moment 3 funded EU projects, then starting at the beginning with the definition of the energy efficient mortgage, then the market-led protocol and the common data portal. At the moment, we are working on one side to defining preferential financing condition and then create an integrated market for energy efficiency, arriving to the definition of the energy efficiency label. What is behind, and this is what we think to be really the important thing, is the business case. This means the negative relationship between the energy efficiency and the credit risk. What we show with our first result of the previous project, and they are currently under evaluation, is that the greener the asset, the lower the credit risk. And then this clearly helps the possibility to create the interest of the banking sector and in general the financial sector in terms of financing and then supporting the energy efficiency and then the retrofitting. At the moment, what we are working is to create this green ecosystem and then looking at the different actors in the market. And then this is the last project that is now running, and where we have the Provincia of Trento and the Scottish government as partner of these projects. They are working on this and then creating this green ecosystem. Here, just a view of the partner of the different projects. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much. So we'll come back to you in a moment, Monica, and we'll when we move to questions. But next we have Antonio Lopez, who is an expert in infrastructure finance. So he's worked for many years as an energy engineer for the European Investment Bank and the Asian Development Bank on renewable energy and energy efficiency. but Antonio is now a senior financial advisor at GNE as the eInvest project leader. And Antonio is going to speak about the role of private financing entities to promote the renovation wave. Hi, Antonio.
Hi, good morning, Vicky. Thank you very much. Let me share my screen. And well, I don't know how to put it in full screen.
That's okay. It's a PDF.
Okay.
I think that'll be it. Yeah, that's okay. That's it. There we go.
So thank you very much. Thanks for organizing and for everyone being here and dedicating your time. I'm representing GNE Finance. It's a private company who is working in many programs to renovate houses. And the mission is trying to decarbonize the housing sector in Europe, and we do from the design is the core in the core of GNE. The know-how is very good on what is sustainable, what is an eco reform, and what improves the wealth and the energy efficiency of the houses. Set up and operate sustainable home renovation programs. So we have financial experts, we manage technical assistance to improve the design and to carry out technically what needs to be done in the buildings, the legal design of the program, and all the admin and marketing setup. I think this is too big. Okay, I think it's better. The renovation at the end of the day is always local. So it's the cities and regions are at the forefront of the renovation wave, and it's key to have national support. So at the national level, I think it has been said this morning already, but we need the minimum requirements, and then we need to have champions in the countries that go beyond these minimum requirements. We need fiscal incentives. It's a very good tool, like in Italy at this moment, what they are doing with the renovations. Funding for the renovation and technical assistance, that is a normal barrier for many of the people, especially when we are talking about integral renovations of buildings, and to avoid market distortion due to subsidies. So we have a big renovation wave that is coming, and we need to make the best use of it. We strongly believe that the renovation needs to go public and private. It needs to have a good connection and a good relation. And we need to attract the private players to develop effective and economically self-sustainable renovation. So we need then to see the business opportunity and to fit the market wherever they are needed. So effective PPPs that combine public sector leadership with resources from the private sector to create speed and to go faster is what will stimulate an ecosystem of energy service professionals. I think with the big renovation wave, what we are going to see is that the majority of the renovation companies that are normally very small and not very professional will professionalize in the next 2 to 3 years with all these funds coming for renovation, and we need to make a good use of them. So the public money, I think we have very good examples, like my former colleague Dinis will talk after, like the LENA program. The public money needs to have a big role in the technical assistance, so to promote good projects, to prepare the projects properly, and to have a good foundation and good basis on how the market needs to be structured and work. They also can play a good role on credit enhancement mechanisms, so how to incentivize that the credits are available for everyone, not only for wealth people that normally don't need it, but also to vulnerable people, and to mobilize and dynamize, to be very dynamic on a sector that normally don't have a lot of financing, because you have a lot of money for mortgages, but for the renovation is normally a normal loan with a very high interest and and short term. So credit enhancement is a great mechanism that we need to have it, I think, at the European level and going down to the national real one. Subsidizing interest rates is also a good way to promote financing on the projects. And then, like these are common, normally subsidies and grants for vulnerable people and not vulnerable as well, because subsidies are normally a tool of politicians to improve the energy efficiency of the buildings. And the gap is so big that we need to use all of them at the same time. These are three programs that GNE is working at the moment in Spain. We have Europace in Catalonia, Opengela in the Basque Country, and Regenerate in the Balearic system. And the formula that we are applying and that we are trying to convince all our clients and public counterparts is the same one. We need some help at the beginning with a technical assistant to structure the program, to prepare projects, to really put the good foundations on the programs to make it available. We need affordable financing. We ourselves are providing financing to these projects, and we set up smart funding like guarantee programs for vulnerable people, so they have access to the credit. And we are in the middle, in the core of the whole program, trying to facilitate the technical assistance, the subsidies, the private financing, and convincing the people that this is the right way to go. So accompanying them through the whole chain that is not easy to convince and to work and to create trust. So this is the formula that we are applying. We think that is a good formula, but we need more support from the public level. The times are normally very slow and we need to go faster. And this is the message that I wanted to transmit. So thanks again to everyone, and I'm available for any question.
Thank you very much. That's fantastic. So I'll just come back to Monica on that. So Antonio spoke there about the fairness of transition. So in your situation, how do you ensure a fair transition and not to increase the existing differences between regions or between people within a region?
I mean, the project, my project and the overall project is more on the financing than in habilitating, I mean, people to access to the finance on one side, and on the other side to create the condition for the disclosure of the correct information, and then to be able from a point of view of the banking system, of the financial system, and then also the authority to have the right and the correct and checked information about the improvement of the energy efficiency. Then on this side, I mean, what we do is to try to mobilize the private sector, and this with the aim to help all the area and then all the different type of potential clients, I mean, to be interested in the retrofitting and then the energy efficiency improvement of the building in general. And sorry, I'm not able to give you an answer specifically, but I mean, it is a support action in this direction. I see that Antonio would like to add.
Yeah.
Since it is more.
I just would like to help Monica as well and to add something. I think the public sector is the one that needs to have the role, and the private sector can help them to move faster and to achieve more. And we need to use the public resources, like for example, technical assistance, to create this trust on people and prepare the projects for vulnerable people, for example, and at the same time providing some information to people who really can afford to pay for their own projects, because the project at the end is very similar. We are rehabilitating a building. So the public money, if we create an office, or if we create mediators, or we facilitate this access to information, to knowledge, to know-how, to specific projects, this is part of the equation. And also the public sector needs to put in place mechanisms to enhance the credit, so assessment for vulnerable people to access the financing, because subsidies cannot cover the whole rehabilitation program that we have. So we need private financing as well, private funds. Instead of using their own money, we can use financing in the trying to achieve long-term, 7, 10 years, even more if we can. And public money can be used for this. If we create enough volume, the private actors and the commercial banks will be interested, and the renovation wave will be massive. So we need to do a good combination in a good speed of policies, technical assistance, credit enhancement, know-how, dissemination, and preparing good projects. And this we cannot stop, and we need to continue growing and growing. And this is the only way that we can do it and not leaving someone behind, and not creating big differences between good regions with people with higher money available for them, people with more resources that can afford to pay a project, to assist a forum, to dedicate time to prepare to do something. For people that don't have even time or knowledge to get it. So that's why we need to work in all parts at the same time, and not leaving one behind.
Yeah, that's
Thank
great.
you. Thank you, Antonio. May I add then,
Yes.
since I perfectly agree with what Antonio said, I mean, and probably it is important to remember what I said, the last part. At the moment, we are working on this ecosystem, and then in having involved the public actor in order to habilitate the type of things and the type of action and then support that Antonio well described it before, but I perfectly agree. I mean, we are working more on pushing the private sector to be part of the process, and then looking at the possibility to create a business case, and then in order to see the interest for a win-win action in such a way that for everyone it is possible to see the opportunity to invest in this direction. Thank you, Vicky. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so I think Dennis has joined us. So Dennis, are you?
Hello, good morning.
Hey,
my apologies.
That's okay, you're fine.
My apologies, because I faced some last-minute issues with the laptop. The test went okay, but then I was trying to log in and I didn't manage. Sorry, my apologies.
It's the way of the world at the moment. Okay, so I'll introduce you. So thank you for joining us. Our third contributor is Donis Rodriguez, who is energy expert at the European Investment Bank and has worked in energy efficiency for many years. And Dennis is going to speak about the European Investment Bank's support to building renovation, and that's Elena TA and EIB financing.
Okay, thank you very much, Vicky. I have prepared a brief presentation, but now it gets difficult to show it in the event. But I will nevertheless send it around, and then you can also share it with the participants. So on this specific scope, and I think that many things have already been said. What I have somehow prepared, and I was just making some research about public buildings, investments, energy efficiency, and so on. And I was able to find a recommendation from the European Commission from 1988 about the use of third-party financing. And already at that moment was already written that the public sector should have a kind of a leading role on unlocking investments, and speaking about third-party financing, which nowadays it's mostly understood as energy performance contracting and so on. So this is something which is not, let's say, new. It's something that already exists probably for more than 30 years. And there is still a huge gap, and there are still huge efforts to be made by the public authorities. In terms of the barriers, several barriers exist in terms of the implementation of energy efficiency projects in the public sector, as most of us know. It's not only about financing; it's also about the technical capacity to analyze, to study, and to implement those projects. And in that sense, the EIB is managing on behalf of the European Commission the ELENA facility already since 2009, and we have supported several projects to to mobilize investments in the renovation of public buildings and so on. So in the last 12 years, we have already disbursed more than 2,010 million euros to provide technical assistance to projects in public and private sectors, which have helped to mobilize 7.2 billion euros in investments, which is somehow a very significant effort. And we truly believe that this effort should keep on during the next MFF. We are currently ongoing with discussions with the European Commission to ensure that Elena will still be available during the next period. And with this money, we might be able to continue to support the public entities to develop good energy efficiency projects, in this case, to support the renovation of the public buildings, because in that sense, much work is still to be made. Just to be short and objective, in parallel, the EIB, it's also financing the energy efficiency investments. There is no obligation to link an Elena technical assistance project with an EIB lending operation. They can run in parallel. We have some examples where they are, let's say, grouped together, but they run in different approval processes. And in that sense, since 2012, the EIB has significantly increased the amount of lending to energy efficiency. In 2012, the EIB lent in total 1.1 billion euros for energy efficiency related activities, and that value in 2020 was 5.8 billion euros, what is a significant increase. And we can also share some additional data that about 65% of the EIB lending to energy efficiency is related to energy efficiency in buildings. Of course, that public sector is included here. I didn't have the opportunity to extract all that information to provide you a more accurate figure on that, but much work is still to be done, and we believe that we can play a role on helping public authorities to mobilize investments in the public sector, both with technical assistance, both with the EIB lending, which can be, let's say, a simple loan to a government, or can be, let's say, a more developed financial instrument, blending national funds with structural funds, with private funds. So all the different schemes are available. It's just a question of getting engaged with the national authorities so that we can also help them to understand what is the best way to move forward.
That's great. Thank you very much for that. So I'll just ask you the same question that I've asked the other two. So again, this may not be, you may not consider this to be entirely your responsibility, but how do you ensure a fair transition and not to increase the existing differences either between regions or of people between regions? Yeah, and if Antonio, if everybody puts their cameras on, then we can enter a bit of a discussion. Anybody wants to put questions and answers into the panel, that would be good as well. But sorry, back to you, Dennis. So how do you ensure a fair transition? Is that your role, or how do you go about that?
Let's say, in terms of support to public, and we are mostly talking about, let's say, the scope, it's more on public buildings. And in that sense, in terms of regions, both, I will need probably to explain a little bit the scheme of the mechanisms. Both the Elena facility and the EIB lending, they work on a first come first served basis. So in that sense, let's say it's quite difficult for us to ensure that fair transition, but nevertheless, we always assess the feasibility of the projects, if they are relevant, if they are pertinent, if they also comply with the current thresholds and with the law which is applicable at each one of the member states. So in that sense, for a typical energy efficiency project, because we have energy efficiency eligibilities, that the different regions are not, let's say, immediately taken into account. But if we are talking about urban renovation, urban regeneration project, in that sense, our eligibilities, they really take into account the level of development of each one of the regions, and then our financing can be and is more dedicated to the less developed regions. Let's say we have different eligibilities, depending on the scope of the projects. For urban development and urban regeneration projects, we take into account the level of development of the different regions. But when we speak about energy efficiency, typically we have, let's say, an horizontal approach to all the regions and all the eligible member states, and we take them, let's say, we take them equally in consideration.
Great, thank you very much for that. Yeah. Okay, so this is, anybody can respond on this one, but so, because we're talking about private money, so how does that client risk affect your business models, and how do you deal with that, you know, in reality on a day-to-day basis? Monica, do you want to?
And what we do is to help first in understanding what is the meaning of the climate risk better, the transition risk. And the main point is, and this is more for the financial sector, let's say, to enlarge the horizon. And since the financial sector usually work on in evaluating the risk in terms also of default of the companies and so on, looking at 1 year ahead, and this is not clearly the right dimension when you have to discuss about the climate better transition risk. Then our aim, and this is with the last project in particular, Transparency, that is related to the disclosure for the ESG ratings, and then to give the right instrument to understand and then measure the sustainability dimension in order also to be able to take them into account in evaluating the creditworthiness of the companies and so on. But really the main point is to move the horizon for the evaluation. And this is the only way in which it is possible to correctly take into account this transition risk. And then what I have to say is that in the day-by-day analysis at the moment is not really there, this evaluation, at least for the main part of the financial cycle. But at the moment there is really a lot of attention and then a lot of work that is really ongoing in order to correctly first understand and then, as I said, measure this point. Then I mean the situation is quite quickly improving on this side.
Okay, oh, that's good to know. Okay, and Antonio, the same to you. So you talked about, you know, attracting investment, but you know, what about the risk? Is that something that you face? That
well, I was discussing with a colleague yesterday and a friend on credit enhancement mechanisms, on how to guarantee people, vulnerable people, how to put risk sharing mechanisms, guarantees, and he just stopped me and said, look, we need to follow good banking practices at the end of the day. So the people that cannot afford to pay a loan, we cannot provide them loans because we are creating a bigger problem. So the credit assessment of the people, and we need to be conscious on what we are talking all the time, they need to have enough resources to afford the financing. And we can play with a credit enhancement mechanisms to provide less risk to the investors or to the banks. We can enlarge the terms so the quotas are lower. We can reduce the subsidy, but at the end of the day, need to be able to pay. And this is not about rebuilding renovation. And at the same time, the subsidies needs to cover this gap, so not leaving one behind. And for example, in Spain, the subsidies for the building rehabilitation covers up to 85 or 90% if they are vulnerable people, so groups of people that really cannot afford to take a loan. We need to be careful with the increase on the taxes that they need to pay later on if they receive money, that sometimes it creates a big problem for them. So in this sense, a combination of subsidies and tax incentives are very good for this special group of vulnerable people that cannot afford. Yeah. And for the rest of the population, I think we need to provide them financing, credit enhancement mechanisms. And we have a whole range of people. We are always talking a lot about the vulnerable ones because we cannot leave one behind, of course. But there's a big group of people as well that also needs to receive financing and long-term with good interest rates to renovate their houses and to have more comfort.
Yeah, no, and it's a really good point. We all found out in 2008 what happens when people are given loans that they can't pay back. It's a fair point. And you, Dennis, if you'd like to comment. So how does the client risk affect your business models, and how do you deal with that as a reality day to day?
Okay, we can probably look to the client risk in two different perspectives. And as an engineer, I always have, let's say, a more technical background than a financial one, but I will try to get on that. So in the very first part, we always have the financial risk. We always need to understand if we have a reliable counterpart and if that counterpart is available or is able to let's say to repay the loan within the maturity which has been defined. And that is always for us a question, and is always something that we always appraise. Even if we have, let's say, investment loans, direct loans to a counterpart, we always make that risk assessment, of course, and it's something that we need to take into account. But if we have intermediated loans where we are providing a loan to a bank that at the national level it's responsible to provide loans for housing renovation or for SMEs, for energy efficiency in SMEs, then that risk assessment is somehow delegated to the financial intermediate. Because then we just deal with the first line of risk between us and the national bank, and the second one is delegated to that bank. But this is something that all banks look, and this is always related with the ability of the counterparts to repay the loans. But then we also have the technical risk on that, and on the technical risk, we have, let's say, two different aspects, one of them more on the project management and the other one which will also be related with the ability of the asset owner to repay the loan. So the first one that we also take into account, and I think this is a slightly different approach from the IB, from the, let's say, usual banks, is that we always look to the technical risk of the project. If the counterpart is able to implement and to properly manage the project. And if that is the case, perfectly. If we somehow realize that there might exist some risks in terms of project management, project implementation, we can make available technical assistance, or we can enhance our monitoring to the project by including additional obligations, additional requirements to the counterpart with additional reporting, so that we can make sure that the project is being correctly implemented. Because if we are, and now just probably taking a little bit on the example that Antonio mentioned, if we are supporting the renovation of social housing in any European country, we also want to make sure that the building which is being renovated is delivered with good quality, that the applicable standards are applied, and that we don't have, let's say, a subgrade renovated building. And this is one point, let's say, typical from the engineer's side. And then there is another point which, let's say, where the economists and the engineers, let's say, get a little bit together. In some cases, it's also relevant to understand if the project releases enough money or an amount of money which can also help the owner to repay the loan. If we are talking about social housing, that in most of the cases will not happen. We are talking about people and families which are suffering or which are exposed to energy poverty. And typically what we will be able to offer them with a renovated building, it's to increase the thermal comfort, to increase the living conditions during that within that dwelling. And typically from the before to the after, we will not see any significant decrease in the energy consumption that would also result in additional financial savings for that family. That typically it's not the case in a social housing project. But in the opposite side, we might have projects in the public sector or in the private sector where the amount of savings can also be used to assess the risk of the counterpart to repay the loan. And in some projects, we can have 20, 30, 40. If we go for street lighting, we can have 60, 70% of energy savings. And typically those savings are enough in most of the cases to repay the loan to a financial institution, even if it's a bank, as we are dealing directly, or if, let's say, a municipality decides to renovate buildings or street lighting systems based on an energy performance contract. And in that case, we typically have a third party, someone external, which will be responsible to finance, to implement, and to manage the energy efficiency project for a predefined period without any capital input from the public or the private entity. So the risk in our perspective can have, let's say, different approaches, and we typically look at that from those three perspectives.
Great, thank you very much for that. Yeah, and thank you for adding the technical risk as well. It's a very good point. So we've talked earlier about certainty in.
May I add something on this?
Yes, of course. Yes, please do.
Sorry, since I mean what Tiny is present now, it is really a part of our, I mean, the result of our projects. Since I mean, what we identify as the two main drivers to explain this good, let's say, relationship between energy efficiency and credit risk, than the fact that the greener the asset, the more less it is the risk. It relates to this fact that there is the reduction in the cost of the building, of the maintenance of the building, and then this means that there is more available funding money to repay the loan on one side, and the other side, this is really important, is the fact that the value of the underlying asset and the building that is underlying the loan and then the funding, I mean, improve its value. Then in terms of loan to value indicators, that is for the financial system, it is an important indicator. This improve, and then this explain also a part of the result that, as I said, the greener the asset, the better is in terms of credit risk. And I agree. I mean, this is certainly useful for the private residential sector, let's say, but also looking at the small and medium enterprises, and looking on the other side, I mean, to invest in energy efficiency at the moment has several
Oh, we lost that. Bit of disruption on the line there for you, Monica. We'll come back to you.
I can hear you without problem, but it's
okay. So we'll come back to you in a moment, maybe. So next thing I was interested in talking about was standardization. So we've talked about certainty. Hello.
Hi. May I add something here?
You may. Yes, please do. Please do. You can take up the technical hitch and fill the gap.
I was hearing to Dennis and I was remembering the presentation from Monica, and I think there is a lot of work to be done here. There are many things that has been done on multiple benefits, on the building retrofitting, on credit assessment of the buildings and the people who is living there, and if they are better, if they will have a better scoring on the risk assessment, if their willingness to build to be on a better building, their consciousness on be more sustainable, the more benefits that they have. We had a project in the EIB before with passive housing in the north of Spain, with the increase in the cost of development of these houses only 10%, and reduction in the energy bill of 80 to 90%. For fighting for energy poverty is extremely useful. 10% in increase of cost during the 50 years of a house is really not significant, but the reduction in energy level is very high. The well-being of the people inside the building is something that the people normally don't measure. But if the people is more comfortable, if they have less days of sickness, if they can continue working, if they feel better, there's a lot of multiple benefits on in the well-being of the people, and this is something that is not measured or quantified, and the people cannot use it, not even the politicians, the bureaucrats, the commercial banks, the financiers. And this is where I think we need to put the focus on providing more data and analysis and disseminating this knowledge, so we can increase the momentum and the renovation in all the spectrum.
Yeah, thank you. And that's a really good point. I mean, it's the same issue as countries measuring everything by GDP, and these things aren't just a financial measure, and there are limits by doing that, and that is a really good point. And just as if you install retrofit double glazing, even in the UK, you may not recoup the energy costs for that, but it may be a comfort factor.
I read an article a few years ago about the recovery time of patients in the Mount Sinai Hospital if they are on a bedroom on a room in the south face, so facing the sun, or in the north one, and facing the sun, they recover faster. So is something that will minimize the cost for the hospital. It will increase the resources. So the well-being of the people, the multiple benefits, is something that we are not measuring, and just measuring the energy is not enough to really quantify the benefits that we have.
Yeah.
If I can just if I can just compliment on what Antonio said, it would be easy to agree or disagree with him. We know ourselves for quite a long, but I think that is exactly, I think that's a good topic to speak about, because we usually discuss between financial analysis and economical analysis. Financial analysis is only on the energy savings, and it's clear that for private housing, it's not enough to unlock investments, because we always need to take into account what is the income of the families. And if they cannot pay more than that, it's quite difficult to push them to renovate their houses. But Antonio is absolutely right. We have additional co-benefits, increased in comfort, reduction of diseases, and all that. And we need to find a good way to try to incorporate that value within the building renovation project. And in my humble opinion, and because we also need to have a small carrot to push homeowners to renovate their houses, I think that this economic benefit can be somehow translated in some national grants provided by the national authorities to push forward the different homeowners to move with the renovation projects. Because if it's true, that's easily demonstrated that the diseases will decrease if we just replace the windows because we have a better thermal comfort, that will also decrease the expenditure of the national health systems where we have them. So a part of that money that can be potentially reduced can be somehow translated from the national health budget to some kind of national energy fund or energy efficiency program that could provide some grants for housing renovation. And if we have, let's say, the right balance between what we are saving in one side or potentially saving from what we can provide to the families, also to help them to move forward with that, I think this could be probably an interesting way to unlock those investments, and not understanding the grants as free money, because probably the grants can be somehow related with these co-benefits that a single family cannot never measure.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah. Okay, I think we'll just move on. And so, if Monica, if your connection's better, we'll talk about standardization. So do you think the standardization of sustainable finance, such as the EU taxonomy or the green bond standards, can facilitate access to finance for the building sector?
I think so. I mean, since I'm working at the moment really on the standardization, and then it is important to have a common understanding first of the impact of the energy efficiency specifically, and after as we have discussed, there is really a lot of aspects that have to be taken into account. But anyhow, it is important that from a technical point of view, as Denis said in his presentation, the result in terms of the reduction of the then consumption and gas emission must be checked, and then in such a way that the funding can go in the right direction. There is a lot of attention, as I said, on sustainable finance, but it is important that this attention and then the funding go in the right direction, and then you need standardization. And this standardization is particularly important on one side, and this is the interest from the regulatory point of view, that to avoid any greenwashing behavior, than just to say that it is nice, it is good, and so on, and then potentially increase the ability to have funding without any real result behind. And on the other side, this is important for the correct functioning of the financial markets. There is a lot of investor, the single retail corporate, there is a lot of attention in asking for this type of investing, and then to be able to find the right way to have a real sustainable finance, and to have funding that go in the right direction, and then the information in the market must be correct, must be standardized, and must be the right one. Otherwise, the investing process and then the capital allocation will not be what we need in order to obtain the goal and then the result in terms of transition and sustainable investment. And this is really important. At the moment, it has the same, I think that has the same importance of the transparency, let's say, and the communication of the financial side of the company, and then of the evaluation of the investment. If we really want that the investing and then the funding go in the right and correct direction, then with the idea to have the result of the sustainable development, and to arrive to have the goal for 2030, 2050, and so on, in a general way, it is important that this information arrive in the right way, standardized way to the market.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Yes, it depends what your goal is, whether it's existing. If we're talking about climate neutrality at 2050, then you need to make the certain steps to achieve that. But if along the way you're going to improve somebody's thermal comfort, or in their house as well, but that doesn't achieve climate neutrality in the same way as another deal, you've got to standardize the comparison of those, two different approaches. So any comments on that, Antonio?
I totally agree with Monica. I think it's crucial, the work that the EU is doing on the taxonomy, and it's a fundamental change, because we need to avoid greenwashing that makes a lot of damage in the industry, and we need to distinguish between good practices, people doing good projects and measuring properly, with people just making up the projects and claiming that they are doing a good project. So the taxonomy, even if at the beginning they simplify the tables, or they try to standardize, is a fantastic work that needs to continue working on, and building a little bit more sophisticated models, but we need guidelines, we need the clear rules, standardization, and clear indicators on what we are doing. This will improve the sector and the work of everyone who is doing well the things. So I find it a fantastic initiative, and I think it's something very, very useful.
Great, thank you. So we're almost out of time. So Dennis, if you've got a very short comment on the standardization of sustainable finance.
Yes, I will try to be short, and I will try just to probably raise some space for some external questions if we still have time. So just speaking about the taxonomy and standardization, let's say, from an engineer perspective, it's always easy to say that we don't agree with this threshold or that threshold, because we always have different opinions on that. But I think that is the less relevant aspect of this. I think that for me, the most relevant point on this, it's about the trust and about avoiding greenwashing, because we have several challenges to implement all these targets for the upcoming years. And one thing, it's true, we need to allocate a huge amount of financial resources to this specific activity. And we need public and private money. And we need to have the trust, the confidence of the investors that the assets or the funds in which they are investing, they are really being used to reduce the energy consumption, to tackle the environmental aspects, to tackle climate change. And I think that for me, the crucial word on this, it's about the trust. We need to make sure that pension funds, when they believe that they are investing in green projects, that those projects, they are really green. And we have a huge scope of financial entities and other entities working in this field, and it's quite easy that different entities have different thresholds to consider investments green. And I think that this is the big advantage.
If I may, Dennis, I mean, trust is not enough in finance. I agree with what you're saying, but it must be standardized. I mean, the way in which this go through is to have standardization and then in some way certification of not only on the technical side, but also on the way in which these improvement and these results in terms of sustainability are measured then from the perspective both of the companies, but also the financial institution. Since you're right, I mean, there is a lot of demand in this direction, but the trust must be sustained. I mean, with the
no. I fully agree with you. Sorry for this brief note. When I was talking about trust, it's not trust itself. It's not only saying that this is green. We need to have the standardization and the certification to make sure that the trust that the investors have, it's really achieved. Okay, this is not the right word, but we need to make sure
perfectly.
Yeah.
But we are on the same page.
Yeah.
but thank you for your note, because if I was not clear enough, thank you very much.
That's right. It's all part of the trust. It's all being part of a system that is transparent and equitable. And yes, quite.
Exactly.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we have a couple of comments. So one is actually the Portuguese LTRS considered the wider benefits calculation, and we realise a return of the investment going from plus 40% to plus 90%. And then this is from Jordi. So totally agree on the necessity on monitoring the success to avoid greenwashing and properly promote the good actions. But for most of the programme, there is no money to monitor, just that they're using certification as a proof, which is quite poor. So we'll come back to Jordi in a moment, because he's going to close the session. So he might be able to elaborate that. Oh, no, he's not. Sorry, Bernard is. Anyway, but thanks for that, Jordi. That's, yeah. Anybody want to respond to that?
If I may, since before I lost a part of the discussion, sorry, I was able to hear you, but not the vice versa. Regarding the Danish point, and Antonio probably saying that it is important to have the public support in order also to be able to take into account, I mean, the overall benefits of the renovation. That is not only the reduction in cost. I mean, in Italy at the moment, there is this super bonus strategies. That means that there is practically funding, free funding and complete free funding for the energy efficiency renovation. And then this is, I mean, it is in line with this type of idea, and I agree. I mean, the single, then the family, or the single municipality, for the municipality it is a little bit different, but it is easier to see the immediate return, but not the overall return for the system. And one main driver is also the improvement of the for the system, let's say, it is the improvement of the energy efficiency performance of the building, and this means less cost for the single, but less energy consumption, less gas emission, and an improved value also for the bank and the financial system giving the loan, the mortgages, or what it is. But the single does not see all. Okay, then it is necessary to have something else, somebody else helping in doing this, since the overall result is much bigger. Regarding the green certification, the certification, the Jordi comment at the end, I agree. I mean, at the moment, there is the APC, or I mean, related certification. I mean, they are certainly useful, but not enough, I mean, to guarantee to avoid greenwashing. To this, I mean, our project at the moment, we are working on a label that to do more than that. I mean, really look at the possibility to act also according to the green taxonomy, to certify, and then to have this work done both on a technical part and the financial part, in order to have this label that help in understanding also the value in terms of energy efficiency of the different assets.
That's great. Thank you very much. I think we'll draw a conclusion there. We're pretty much out of time, but that's great. Thank you very much to our three panelists there. That was a fantastic discussion. So Dennis from EIB, and Monica and Antonio. Good, yeah, great discussion. Thank you. So now we have a survey for you to fill in, which will be displayed somewhere. And meanwhile, Bernard Massimo will talk about what's happening tomorrow, day 3.
Just to, I'm Jordi from
Jordi, hello.
Hello. Just a discussion. I had, sorry, the survey will be just pasted in the chat. So if you go to the chat and just click the link, and then the really small survey, 5 minutes to answer, and it will help us a lot to improve the next sessions. Just I give you the floor to Bernard. Thanks.
Thanks, Jordi. Bernard. We've lost Bernard. I can tell you about tomorrow. Oh no, here we go. Here we go. Hello.
Yes, hello everyone. First of all, thank you very much to all the panelists for their information and messages and proposals or suggestions regarding the thematic of financing. I just want to give you some information for the next policy session, the last one tomorrow. As Efficient Buildings community of projects focuses on transferring and capitalization, we are implementing a pilot and innovative action, which we call city partnerships, which is creating partnerships between cities from the north shore of the Mediterranean and cities from the southern shore of the Mediterranean, working on the thematic of efficient buildings, energy efficiency in public buildings. And we will organize a roundtable to create dialogue between these cities and institutional Euro-Mediterranean institutional actors in order to assess what kind of support could be given to the cities or could be received from these institutions. And in fact, the idea of this pilot action comes also from the fact that since the beginning of the project, we are building ties with the Union for the Mediterranean, and specifically with the platform created by this institution related to renewable energy and energy efficiency. And we will also sign a memorandum of understanding between our community and EU-funded project, which is called MICMED, for mitigation enabling energy transition in the Med region. And why this memorandum of understanding? It's because we think we could, we have found synergies between the two projects, and then we could enhance the work and the dialogue around the whole Mediterranean basin. So tomorrow, for the policy station, we will have 5 different sessions. The first introduction by Mrs. Agnès Rampal, who is the co-chair of the Urban Cities Network and Deputy Mayor of the City of Nice. Then we will have the intervention from the Senior Deputy Secretary General for Energy and Climate Action from the Union for the Mediterranean. And then Energy Cities will present the city partnerships. We will then organize a roundtable on the benefits and challenge of this dialogue. And then we will end with the signature of the memorandum of understanding. So thank you very much, and we hope to see you again tomorrow morning, even this afternoon for the capacity building workshop, as it was mentioned by Julia this morning, and then tomorrow afternoon we will have also additional capacity building workshops, and then 3 more next week. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you to all of our panelists, and thank you to our interpreters as well. And there'll be the capacity building workshop this afternoon, and we will have another policy session tomorrow morning on the entire Mediterranean basin, the north-south transition.
Just
Thank you very much.
One more thing, Vicky, I just paste another link to the...
you did, yes, I saw that.
Because it seems that for some people, the first one doesn't work. So please go to the new one link that it's working.
Thanks, Jordi.
Okay, thanks to you. Thanks to all of the worst.